Nephilim of the old world, mummified ancient aliens, secrets of the globe, pyramids of past, present, and future. All this and more tonight.
Oh my goodness. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Nightlight. Oh, hello, Belnery. I will drink some anti water. Thank you very much. We have quite the treat tonight. Here we have, premiering on the Mystery Channel, right here on Monochrome TV, the very first episode of Nightlight, which, depending on how the ratings go, might become reoccurring. But we will have to see, won't we? Thank you all for joining me this evening, and welcome to Nightlight, the only show where the line between truth and fiction is erased. Tonight's episode concerns internet stories and strange occurrences. These stories in particular have been curated from a variety of forum sites, such as Parawatch forums, Net Nostalgia forums, and 4chan. There is always some kind of truth in fiction, and fiction is everywhere around us. We speak in fiction, telling lies without realizing it. We think in fiction and live in fictional worlds. But all fiction is built on top of a foundation of truth, often so buried it cannot be seen without digging through all that comprises that very fiction. Do not mistake this for believing all lies are somewhat true, but rather that all lies come from truer things. They have an origin point, which itself is from beliefs, from hate, from fear, from love, or from hope. Here on Nightlight, we believe that by accepting truth as fiction, or by erasing the line between the two, the deeper meaning of both, of either one, becomes easier to grasp. If you examine a piece of media, such as a piece of fiction, seriously and consider it, you might find something out that you didn't notice before. You might find a piece of truth. The series is intended as episodic, although we will see how that goes, and is curated only to contain stories that we here at Monochrome TV believe are worth your consideration, including fact, fiction, and the in-between. Nightlight is broadcast in front of a live audience. Think of tonight as your very own personal hallucination of the adorable Akra. Thank you very much for joining us. So I think you have a general idea of how this will go. We will go through, I will read a story for all of you, and then afterwards I intend to discuss the story, and you are free to share your own thoughts, in fact encouraged to do so. So without further ado, why don't we get into our first story, which we have called Candle Cove, from 2009. This is from the Net Nostalgia forum on the television subforum, local television subforum. Oh yes, and let me quickly give you all a little bit of a thing to look at. Candle Cove, there it is. And we will put that on the TV over there. There we go. The thread starts with Skies Hail 033. Subject Candle Cove, local kids show. Does anybody remember this kids show? It was called Candle Cove. I must have been 6 or 7. I never found a reference to it anywhere, so I think it was on a local station around 1971 or 1972. I lived in Ironton at the time. I don't remember which station, but I do remember it was on at a weird time, like 4 p.m. Mike_Painter65 replies to the thread. It seems really familiar to me. I grew up outside of Ashland and was 9 years old in 72. Candle Cove. Was it about pirates? I remember a pirate marionette at the mouth of a cave talking to a little girl. Skies Hail replies, yes. Okay, I'm not crazy. I remember Pirate Percy. I was always kind of scared of him. He looked like he was built from parts of other dolls. Real low budget. His head was an old porcelain baby doll. Looked like an antique that didn't belong on the body. I don't remember what station this was. I don't think it was WTSF though. A new user, Jaren2005, joins in on the thread. Sorry to resurrect this old thread, but I know exactly what you mean, Skies Hail. I think Candle Cove ran for only a couple months in 71, not 72. I was 12 and I watched it a few times with my brother. It was channel 58. Whatever station that was. My mom would let me switch to it after the news. Let's see what I remember. It took place in Candle Cove. It was about a little girl who imagined herself to be friends with pirates. The pirate ship was called the Laughingstock, and Pirate Percy wasn't a very good pirate because he got scared too easily. And there was Calliope music constantly playing. Don't remember the girl's name, Janice or Jade or something. I think it was Janice. Skies Hail replies, thank you, Jaren. Memories flooded back when you mentioned the Laughingstock and Channel 58. I remember the bow of the ship was a wooden smiling face, with the lower jaw submerged. It looked like it was swallowing the sea, and it had that awful Ed Wynn voice and laugh. I especially remember how jarring it was when they switched from the wooden plastic model to the foam puppet version of the head that talked. Mike Painter then replies, haha, I remember now too. Do you remember this part, Skies Hail? You have to go inside. Skies Hail replies, Mike, I got a chill reading that. Yes, I remember. That's what the ship always told Percy when there was a spooky place he had to go in, like a cave or a dark room where the treasure was. And the camera would push in on Laughingstock's face with each pause. You have to go inside. with his two eyes askew, and that flopping foam jaw, and the fishing line that opened and closed it. It always looked so cheap and awful. You guys remember the villain? Oh wait, I'm forgetting my ambience. You guys remember the villain? He had a face that was just a handlebar mustache above really tall, narrow teeth. I honestly thought the villain was Pirate Percy. I was about 5 when the show was on, Nightmare Fuel. Oh, then that was a reply from a new user, Kevin Hart. Then Jaren, 2005, replies, that wasn't the villain. The puppet with the mustache, that was the villain's sidekick, Horace Horrible. He had a monocle too, but it was on top of a mustache. I used to think that meant he only had one eye. But yeah, the villain was another marionette. The Skin Taker. I can't believe what they let us watch back then. Kevin Hart replies, Jesus H. Christ, the Skin Taker. What kind of a kid's show were we watching? I seriously could not look at the screen when the Skin Taker showed up. He just descended out of nowhere on strings. Just a dirty skeleton wearing that brown top hat and cape. And his glass eyes were too big for his skull. Christ almighty. Sky's Hail replies, wasn't his top hat and cloak all sewn up crazily? Was that supposed to be children's skin? Yeah, I think so, replies Mike Painter, 65. Remember his mouth, they made a typo, didn't open and close. His jaw just slid back and forth. I remember the little girl said, why does your mouth move like that? And the Skin Taker didn't look at the girl but at the camera and said, to grind your skin. Sky's Hail replies, I'm so relieved other people remember this terrible show. I used to have this awful memory, a bad dream I had where the opening jingle ended and the show faded in from black. And all the characters were there. But the camera was just cutting to each of their faces. And they were just screaming. And the puppets and marionettes were flailing. Spastically. And just all screaming. The girl was just moaning and crying like she had been through hours of this. I woke up many times from that nightmare. I used to wet the bed when I had it. Kevin Hart replies, I don't think that was a dream. I remember that. I remember that was an episode. Sky's Hail 33 replies, no, not possible. There was no plot or anything. I mean, literally just standing in place, crying and screaming for the whole show. Kevin Hart replies, maybe I'm manufacturing the memory because you said that, but I swear to God, I remember seeing what you described. They just screamed. Jaren, 2005, replies, oh God, yes, the little girl, Janice. I remember seeing her shake and the Skin Taker screaming through his gnashing teeth, his jaw careening so wildly I thought it would come off its wire hinges. I turned it off and it was the last time I watched. I ran to tell my brother, and we didn't have the courage to turn it back on. Then Mike Painter replies with the final post in the thread. I visited my mom today at the nursing home. I asked her about when I was little in the early 70s, when I was 8 or 9, and if she remembered a kids show, Candle Cove. She said she was surprised I could remember that, and I asked why. And she said, because I used to think it was so strange that you said, I'm gonna go watch Candle Cove now, Mom, and you would tune the TV to static and just watch dead air for 30 minutes. You had a big imagination with your little pirate show. What a fun story. That was Candle Cove. Now then, what a fascinating story, huh? A group of people come together, all having memories of the same strange show. Of the same creepy moments in the show. I hope it has a sequel. In a way, actually. I might get to that. This story is very interesting to me. Well, I think it would be interesting to anyone. But we all remember shows that we watched when we were kids. Maybe we even stayed up and watched something we weren't meant to, something that might have been on Adult Swim. Or one way or another, we were watching a totally normal show, Saturday morning cartoons. And then there's that one moment, that one episode that was just creepy. And that lends this story quite a bit of history, in a way. This is, of course, on the Net Nostalgia forums, so they're all bonding over their memory of this show, and they clearly have some fondness for it. After all, they came back to watch it whenever it was airing, apparently, or, when they were available, to turn on to channel 58 and watch static, and somehow, despite all of them just looking at static, they agree on the details of the story to a great degree. Perhaps well, I'd have to look at the general area that these towns are around. Ironton, Ashland. I don't know if any other locations are mentioned, but presuming all of these people may have grown up in the same area, perhaps this is some unique case of mass hysteria. And the explanation is that this is a story which they have formed deep, profound, false memories of. But to such a level of detail, it's certainly strange, isn't it? What else could be an explanation? A ghost? A specter putting on a TV show? Well, ghosts are lots of things, but I'm not sure if they have many TV networks. But what if that mother, she only saw the static briefly. And what if the channel did show Candle Cove, but it wasn't produced by any network? There are stories of TV channels getting hijacked. The most famous one is the Max Headroom incident, as it's known, in which for a brief time a very popular TV channel was completely hijacked, and some teenagers or such put on a very, inappropriate broadcast, at least for the station standards. So maybe Candle Cove was produced independently. They do talk about how cheap everything looked. Maybe everything was done on a strict budget or a publicity stunt. Something like that, maybe. Lots of interesting ideas. What else could be the explanation? To have them all agree on details to such a degree, and to be watching static? What if it is true that they were just watching static on the screen? In fact, if I turn off this channel, look into that. Do you see Candle Cove in there? Is it a bit like the idea that you lose the ability to hear certain frequencies of sound depending on your age? Is it that somehow that broadcast, wherever it came from, maybe a hijacking did occur, but maybe the visuals of Candle Cove were only visible to children or anyone else with a particular sensitivity to however it was broadcast. They all remember watching it on a TV. It isn't as if they had it telepathically implanted in their minds, and they seem to live in different areas. More than anything, the questionable thing is the motive. If we say the ghost route, then let's say the skin taker is a being that wants to terrify children. Or maybe whoever broadcast this just wanted to play a fun joke. A very high effort one, but people are incredible creatures, and they will go to great lengths for comedic effects. So let's say either the ghost, the specter that is the skin taker, the villain of the show, or some other very adventurous prankster broadcast this show, and somehow they make it so only children can see it. And their goal? Just to frighten? Maybe. That would be an explanation, one which we don't have much evidence for. In fact, based on the evidence we have here, the most logical conclusion would be these people all generated false memories. Bringing us back to, I suppose, my initial theory, what if it's a fringe case of mass hysteria, otherwise known as mass psychogenic illness? Mass psychogenic illness has fairly profound effects on large groups of people. It's most famous for the dancing plagues that happened during the medieval period, as well as the meowing nuns, but it has occurred in many other situations. Many people say that the satanic panic was a type of mass psychogenic illness, of mass hysteria, although the effects of mass psychogenic illness, or MPI, tend to be a little more profound than flared religious beliefs, for instance. So I think it is plausible, in this case, for this story, maybe all these kids went to the same school. Maybe there was a story that they don't really remember anymore about a show you can only see in the static. Maybe it just looked like static from afar. And by staring into the static, staring into the snow of the static, the colors would burn into the retina, and you would begin to see the real broadcast behind the static. No, I think that is the most interesting explanation. A child sits down in front of a TV. They aren't blinking that often. Their eyes become more sensitive to minuscule changes in the static snow. And that is how they see Candle Cove. Then it is interesting that they would not mention that in their recollection. For surely such a show would be ephemeral, dreamlike, hallucinatory. And surely their descriptions would differ a little bit, at least particularly around the specific colors of certain things. Some might remember Pirate Percy as having ginger hair, or possibly another would remember Percy as being blonde or brunette, or of different colored eyes. If that were the case, that would be a suitable explanation for my purposes. And that doesn't seem to be the case. Hair color, eye color, it's not brought up particularly much. And details like that are also the most likely to get sort of blended together when age comes to pass and rubs the memories. Someone you remember who may have had blue eyes, suddenly you remember having green eyes. And then right there in your mind's eye, you can see it clear as day. There they are with green eyes. And you convince yourself time after time, every time you think about their eye color, yes, it was green, it was green, it was green. And then you see a photo, and they're blue. And you're very confused. I like that explanation the most, I think. Candle Cove on channel 58 could be seen by anyone, provided they stared long enough into the TV static. And it aired at a specific time, and it was broadcast by some entity, a prankster, a independent children's show creator, perhaps scorned for their ideas, being told the Skin Taker was too horrifying of a thing to show children. And so they take their episodes that they recorded, they obsess over it time and time again, and they illegally broadcast it just weak enough the broadcast left just weak enough that people might not notice it. But children, they watch this show, they remember it, and maybe the little discrepancies, maybe it is, they all originally would have remembered Percy, Pirate Percy, as having different colored hair and eyes. But as soon as they see this Net Nostalgia post, and they read that, let's say, Pirate Percy had ginger hair, then their memory gets rubbed in that same way. It gets falsified, and they suddenly remember Percy as having ginger hair, whether or not that's true. Their memory of such a thing from a long time ago is not so clear, and so the mind is perfectly willing to make concessions, especially if it thinks it might be wrong. Yes, the mystery does still exist of who broadcast Candle Cove, who produced Candle Cove in the first place. I like my theory, though. What about all of you? Do you have any ideas about Candle Cove, what this could be? Maybe not a mass psychogenic illness exactly. Could be a confluence of factors, is always true. But it's like, I see it like having a radio tuned just next to another radio channel. And there's the radio static that you hear. But if you listen closely to the radio, through the static, you can hear the station that's right next to it. And if it's just clear enough, in enough time, you won't remember the static. Because let me ask you this. Have you ever watched a video or a movie on a phone or on the back of an airplane screen? And when you think of that movie or that video, do you remember everything around it? Do you remember the back of the seat? That cold gray they have on the back of an airplane seat? Do you remember the touchpad that you're always a bit worried about the germs that might be on it? Or do you just remember the movie as you saw it? If you've watched a questionably uploaded video of, let's say, an episode of Naruto, which is reversed, it has a big watermark on top of it. Do you remember the watermark? No. Your mind rubs it away and keeps what it thinks is more valuable. You see where I'm going with this, right? They watch it and it looks like static from afar. But through the static, like they're tuned just next to the right channel, they can see the show. And that's why they all remember it. And I think, yes, maybe there is some false memory going on here. And I think there it is, right? I'm very satisfied with this explanation, actually. It's like how our brain obviates our nose from our vision. What else does it hide? Plenty. Yes, exactly. That's a very good point. Our brain plays all sorts of tricks on us to make us see the world as we see it. There are certain colors that you can only see by staring at their opposite, such as Stygian blue or hyperbolic orange. They can only be seen by exhausting the eye and then looking away and seeing the inverted image of that color. It is a fascinating phenomenon. There's lots of visual illusions. There's another one where if you stare at a waterfall for long enough, and then you look away, you will see the world moving like the waterfall. Yes, chimerical color after image. Yes, it's all very fascinating. Very, very fascinating. Now, when I was doing my research, finding stories to bring up for tonight, there was something about Candle Cove which I saw pop up. Here it is. Television adaptation. In 2015, the Sci-Fi Channel announced its intent to adapt the Candle Cove story as the first season of a newly announced series, Channel Zero. The season, named after the creepypasta, expands on the story and centers on a child psychologist who was returned home in order to investigate the 1980s disappearances of his brother and other children. Channel Zero Candle Cove stars Paul Schneider and Fiona Shaw and premiered on October 11th, 2016. So, in a way, Candle Cove did receive a sequel. It received an adaptation and various riffs off of the original story. People trying to recreate the show in various ways. Oh. Yes, it's very interesting. And in fact, some of those recreations are exactly what you see when I show you Pirate Percy right there. That's who that's meant to be, I believe. And that's why I keep bringing up the ginger hair. And then that, I believe, is the Skin Taker. And then I just have a boat because it's a pirate show. That particular photo, the Skin Taker, I believe is from that Channel Zero Candle Cove series. I have not watched it, but at present it's not relevant to the original story. It's its own riff off of the original thing, yeah. Well, by all means, if it's still up, you can go give it a watch over on the Sci-Fi Channel. That's SYFY, to be specific, in their spelling of sci-fi. Now, with that, to continue on with tonight's plans, we will go run a quick ad and then come back and move on to our next story. So please stay tuned. We will be right back after these messages. Well, that was rather quick, I think. Let's move on to our next story. Now that we've solved Candle Cove, everybody, you can tell that now. You can say that you really know what happened over at Candle Cove. Next, moving away from net nostalgia forums, is a story from Parawatch forums called Substation 9. And let me go ahead and tune our TV to show the appropriate images for this one. Let's see. And there we go. Channel 9. All right. Parawatch forums, unlike net nostalgia forums, might need a little bit more of an explanation. This is specifically a forum meant for the paranormal. There's lots of conspiracy theories and such around here. This is Substation 9. The thread starts off with the original poster, Cthulhu Hoop, in 2016. Cthulhu Hoop starts the story saying, I work for an electric company that provides power to over a dozen warehouses and manufacturing complexes. Think of me as an overglorified security guard. I ride around checking substations to make sure an OCB hasn't tripped or an eagle hasn't landed on top of a transformer. I work the graveyard shift, which means most of my nights are spent sitting in a trailer and fighting for enough cell reception to stave off the crippling boredom. Oh yes, let's get some music in here. Let me get something for us right now. We move on to this one. And I'll bump up the audio so we can both hear that. Raise a little bit. All right. The only time this job involves any actual work is when it rains. First, some background. Whatever image you've got in your head of this place, you're probably wrong. It's a couple thousand acres of woodlands, rivers, and country roads, with the occasional warehouse in a field. Calling this place remote doesn't do it justice. Even folks in the boonies don't know we're here. There's nobody around except the deer. You'll see 50, maybe 60 a night. The substations are just shacks out in the woods. Hardest part of the job isn't checking them, it's finding them. I don't want to give too many details. I like my job and would like to keep it. But there used to be a mining town near here when they built a dam downstream. The whole place turned into a lake. Townsfolk were forced to relocate. The mine and factories were flooded. When the lake receded, they demolished everything and built new factories. Now here's where things get interesting. When they demolished all of those buildings, they didn't demolish the basements. And most of these substations had underground tie-ins into them. Beneath each of these little overgrown shacks is a sprawling network of tunnels connecting to hundreds of basements for buildings that no longer even exist. This underground complex basically goes on forever. When it does rain, the basements flood. And when it rains hard, the water rises out of the basements and floods the substations, which are filled with extremely sensitive high voltage equipment. Starting to see the problem. This is where I come in. My job is to drive out each of these substations, go into the basement, make sure the sump pumps are kicked on. They usually do when the water hits a certain height, but the floats can get hung up or the pumps need to be replaced. I know what you're thinking. Why not plug the basements up? Well, besides the cost and having to shut down each substation while we work, there's also the fact that this job partly exists because someone has to check on those sump pumps. So none of us are exactly chomping at the bit to point this out to upper management. When you first get hired, all the old timers tell you the same thing. Don't fuck around in the basements, don't wander, don't explore, go down, do your job, come up, watch where you step, always bring 2 flashlights. Some of these tunnels are nearly a century old, made when being up to code just meant it didn't collapse 5 minutes after you built it. On top of that, no one knows what's down here or what connects to what. The guy that trained me once walked from one substation to another without ever catching a glimpse of the sky. That's over 3 miles of tunnels. 3 miles. In case you're wondering, yeah, everybody says don't fuck around in the basements, but everyone still fucks around in the basements. You just have to watch your step, stay alert, and always, always bring 2 flashlights. And trust me, you would not believe some of the shit we find down there. Oh, that's the wrong image. Whoops. Hold on. There it is. This tunnel right here, this is below, let's call it substation 9. The farthest down any of us have gotten down this tunnel is about 500 yards. That's 5 football fields, or under a third of a mile. What's past that, you ask? No one has a clue. The tunnel slants down, leaving the rest of it completely submerged. We've tried pumping it out, but the water won't go lower than what you see here, which means there's who knows how many more tunnels and basements beyond this point. I got more to show, including pictures. I'll write about this tomorrow. Then, true to their word, tomorrow Cthulhu Hoop makes a follow-up. Okay, first things first, a bunch of people have PM'd me saying that the picture isn't legit and there's no way there's miles of tunnel down there. Let's put this to bed, shall we? And they have a video. Now I believe I've downloaded these videos already. So give me just a quick moment. Yes, here they are under V. Now, for all of your viewing pleasure, I think I will put these full screen, and I will be quiet during them. So, first, we go to black. Yeah, I ain't going down there. Not without two flashlights at least. And Wellingtons, big boots to make sure the water doesn't fill your shoes. Oh my. And more importantly, that you don't get shocked through them in case some of that high voltage equipment gets touched by the water. Hmm. One moment. I'll be right back. Yeah, there were. It feels like there might be some live wires. I'll be right back. You won't even know I'm gone. Uh, won't actually go to ads, but I'll go to the ad screen. Sorry about that. We return. So, let's continue. Thank you. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, I'll answer a couple of questions people have been asking. We use cheap, disposable sump pumps because our company doesn't want to spend the money to install anything else. That being said, a few of the substations do have some old centrifugal pumps, either right there or in an adjacent basement. We run hoses and use them as backups for areas that get flooded really bad. The problem is that some of these pumps are over 50 years old, and it's hard to find compatible parts. And not many of us, besides me and a few others, know how to fix them. None of us are actual electricians. We're dispatchers for electricians. Rather than paying trained pros to watch this place, they pay us a fraction of the rate. When we find a blown fuse or a downed transformer, we call the electricians and they handle it. We're also responsible for checking the OCBs and making the substations dry. The electricians don't go into the basement. We handle a lot of substations, over 50. The two biggest have 220 kilovolt transformers. They drop down to 66 kilovolts. We've also got a couple of booster stations, a potable water plant, and some other stuff. I don't want to get too specific about the mining town or when it flooded, because I'd rather not have people figuring out where this is or who I am. Again, I like my job. I will say that after the flood, the mine collapsed and was never reopened. The scariest thing I've seen down here, is a family of raccoons. If that doesn't sound very scary, then I presume you've never had your flashlight catch a pair of eyes flashing out from the shadows while you're stumbling around in an underground tunnel several miles away from the closest human soul. Some people have been asking about the always bring two flashlights thing. Let me show you something. And here we have another video. Definitely gets very dark down there. Oh wait, hold on, I need to delete that. Okay, sorry about that. Definitely gets very, very dark down there once you turn off your flashlight. See how dark it gets when I turn off my flashlight? Now imagine that's your only flashlight and you just lost it. Maybe you ran out of batteries or you dropped it. Now imagine having to navigate these tunnels in absolute darkness. To make things worse, and I say, see this? There we go. That's the right picture. This is a hole full of water. These basements are full of stuff like this. Drain trenches, collapsed floors, elevator shafts, sometimes even straight up pits. Some are just several feet deep, others are several dozens of feet deep. A coworker of mine has fallen into one of these, and let me tell you, they ain't no joke. Some of them go down to a lower sub-basement that's been completely flooded. There's entire chambers down here full of old pumps and machines that have been submerged for decades. Again, you would not believe some of the shit we find down here. 2 days later, Cthulhu Hoop adds on to this thread. Yeah, bring 3 flashlights in case you lose your first 2 flashlights. And just in case, bring a 4th flashlight in case you lose those 3. It may be a 5th one for good luck. Just a backpack full of flashlights, actually, and make sure their batteries are full. So 2 days later, on a Friday, Cthulhu Hoop adds on to this thread with a new post. And they have a new image. Let me see if it's lined up. There it is. It's a little hard to see with the CRT lines there. Just in case, bring flashlight blueprints so you can build your own if necessary. Exactly. Absolutely right. You're thinking right now. So they continue the thread and say, okay, it's been a while since I last posted, but I wanted to answer a few more questions. When we go down, we carry an O2 monitor. Mainly, we're worried about things like pockets of nitrogen. We also wear heavy gloves, rubber, steel-toed boots, and ventilation masks in case of asbestos. A lot of these places smell pretty much exactly how they look. Sometimes they smell worse. You can still find some things from the old town above ground in the woods, mostly concrete slabs. But there's a rusted husk of a truck sitting in a tree somewhere. We still have no idea where the collapsed mine is, and quite frankly, none of us are interested in looking for it. It's probably filled with poisonous fumes and other toxic, nasty shit. There aren't a lot of animals down here because there aren't a lot of ways to get in that we don't directly control. I still have no idea how the fuck those raccoons managed it. Some of you have been asking me if anyone has actually gotten lost down here. Now, well, about that, remember the 2 flashlight thing? It's just good sense. It's hard enough to find your way around down here. How are you going to manage without light? There's no phone reception either. Just you alone with miles and miles of decaying concrete, rancid pools of water, and rusted machines in pitch black darkness. But we got a saying in industrial work, every rule is written in blood. The reason we all carry 2 flashlights is because of what happened when someone didn't. I had a coworker. Let's call him John. He was a real good guy, clever, good head for numbers, kept to himself, real quiet, along with me and 3 others. We handled the graveyard shifts for the whole crew. One year, during a thaw, and we have a new image. Is that the right one? Yes. Past tense when speaking of John. Uh-oh. Yeah, had a coworker. One year during a thaw, the sump pumps were getting overwhelmed. Too much water coming in. They couldn't dump it fast enough. John wanted to hook up some of these old centrifugal pumps that were just sitting around in these basements and use them to give our own pumps a fighting chance. It was a good idea, but a lot of work. Some of these pumps hadn't seen action for decades. But John stuck with it. He hunted down every pump he could find and serviced them, hooked them up with hoses, and managed to keep our substations dry all the way into late spring. Pretty impressive. A few days after we got things under control, I did a swap and ended up coming in during a day shift. I was John's relief. When I got to the trailer, the truck was missing, and John was gone. The last entry in the logbook mentioned heading out to check on the sump pump in one of the substations. I had to walk there. The truck was right outside, still idling. I went downstairs and searched over 2 hours for John. Then I called the police. There was an investigation, a search, the whole 9 yards. Most of us came in off the book to help. We looked through those tunnels for a month, maybe even longer, never so much as found a hair or hide of him. Another year later, another coworker, we'll call her Patrice, took me aside. She showed me something she found during one of her rounds. A flashlight with dead batteries. It had some tape wrapped around the pommel with John's initials soldered on it. Bring 2 flashlights. 2 more days later, Cthulhu makes another post. People are expressing skepticism regarding the size of these basements and whether they're not all really interconnected. I took a short video to try and give you a sense of scope. Here, pardon the heavy breathing new mask, and I will get that right up for all of us. Hello, Akari. I tune in and see man walking through dark, wet basement. My brain grows. Why does the man simply not go home and not be down here? It's his job to be down there. And more importantly, he has an internet argument to win. Oh. See that tunnel at the end? It's part of a whole other facility that's just as big as the one I started in. I'll try to take footage of it later. Yeah, in this economy? Anyway, more answers to questions. An argument to win? Carry on then, yes. Oh, right, and I should get the music back. I'm sure my voice is more than enough, but it helps to have, a little bit of extra atmosphere. There we go. Company policy is that we're not supposed to be exploring these spaces. They know we do it, but they pretend not to know. No, we never found John. As far as the police are concerned, he wandered off into the woods. As far as we're concerned, he fell into a flooded sub-basement and drowned. For those of you saying we ought to have shut the facility down, drained the basements completely, and kept looking for John, that's basically what we tried to do. Again, some of these sub-basements cannot be drained. Water just keeps coming in, either from the river or the flooded mine, or possibly both. Remember, you're dealing with massive underground structures that have been filling with water for decades. Unless you're willing to start a billion-dollar excavation project to dig out all of these basements, there's literally no way to recover that body. If you think it sounds creepy to work in a massive underground complex, knowing that the drowned corpse of your coworker is lurking in a flooded sub-basement under your feet, well, you're right. It's creepy as hell. Actually, it's why most of us stay the fuck away from the substation he vanished under. A lot of you have said you want to hear about some spookums. Well, I know this is going to be disappointing, but outside of what happened to John, literally nothing spooky has ever happened to me here. A few of my coworkers have told me about things they have encountered, though. I don't know whether you should trust them, but I'll provide a few examples. Patrice says at least on 3 separate occasions she's heard some like muffled old-timey radio music playing from below. She didn't recognize the song, but says it was the same one all 3 times. Ed, the guy who trained me, says he's heard some of the old original pumps kicking on by themselves. This actually isn't all that weird. John repaired a bunch of them. Some of them we still use even today. But Ed claims the ones he's heard kicking on aren't the ones John repaired. They're deeper in, somewhere in the parts of the complex we haven't explored yet. That's another thing I should clarify, and I guess counts as a spookum. We haven't explored the entire complex. Not yet. There's still dozens of passages, doorways, and stairwells we haven't gone down. Phil, one of the old-timers, claims he once saw some pale, naked guy squatting in one of the tunnels. But we're all pretty sure he's either bullshitting us or it was really just a raccoon. He also says he saw a section of Substation 9 that ties into the collapsed mine. 2 new hires claimed to hear knocking and yelling on the other side of a sealed door. Several doors down here are welded shut. In both cases, the guys left for a different job. I mentioned we have a potable water plant, but I should have clarified we had a potable water plant. It's abandoned now. No one's ever been able to get clean drinking water working this place. All the faucets and drains would get gummed with this congealed gray paste that smells like rotting fish. We use a portable toilet and bring in bottled water by the truckload. That's basically it. Like I said, I haven't encountered any of this stuff myself, so I'm pretty skeptical. Then, a bit later, about a month later, Cthulhu Hoop adds on a new part to the thread. I'm just gonna take a quick sip of anti-water. Okay, so it's been a while since I posted, but there's some news. Ed found John's phone. He nearly broke the damn thing when he was sloshing through the water trying to fix a sump pump. Felt something hard and flat under his shoe. John kept his phone in one of these industrial strength cases, so it was actually in good condition. It can still manage to hold a charge. Well, we went through his shit, and well, like most of us, he took photos of what's below. We recognized most of them, but not the most recent ones. And I hope I have these all in the right order. Let's see. There's the first one. That's the second one. Third one. And that's the fourth one. And the fifth one is the most interesting. Can you see it? Right dead center, middle of the frame. At the end of the tunnel, 2 white orbs. 2 white circles reflecting in the dark. A raccoon. Presumably. It is hard to see. I don't know how to do zoom-ins. But you know what? This is important enough. I'm going to go back to our black screen. And I'm going to try to throw it up on screen so that everybody can get as good a look at this particular image as they can. Let's see. No, not that one. There it is. Take a good long look. Now, they talked about how there are raccoons in these tunnels, and their eyes reflect off of the flashlight. But a raccoon's eyes? Do they look like that in a photo? I've seen a few photos of raccoons, but those eyes, to me, don't look like a raccoon. Maybe you agree with me, maybe you don't. Maybe I'm seeing what I want to see. Spooky. Here's the messed up part. Ed found this phone in Substation 9. According to the logbook, John didn't even go near Substation 9 the day he disappeared. We're all kind of spooked. Right now, Patrice and some others are talking about quitting. Either way, we've talked it over and decided the best option is to turn the phone over to the police and let them sort it out. I almost forgot. That last picture, which is the one we just looked at, Phil keeps saying he's seen that tunnel before. He says it's the collapsed mine. Cthulhu follows up. Let's see, how many days later is that? 6 days later, on the 18th, on a Wednesday. Still 2016, don't worry, we haven't jumped too far ahead. Same month, too. Police are involved. Someone must have lit a fire under the company's ass because now they're moving heaven and earth to try and get Substation 9 drained. Brought in some gigantic pumps to do it with. We've all been working overtime. The pay is good, but nobody's really that happy. None of us want to be here. This is a waste of time, honestly. John's phone just drifted. We're not going to find him down here. On the bright side, at least we'll get to see what the hell is at the end of that hall. Then, about a week later, follow up on the 25th of March, Patrice and 2 others quit. Today, companies offering me time and a half to cover shifts while they look for new workers. Nobody goes into the basements anymore, not unless we have to. 2 days later, Cthulhu posts again. The flooded hall in subsection 9 ends in a set of stairs that go down deeper. I think they found John's body. Same day, 2 hours later, Cthulhu posts a single sentence. It wasn't John's. 1 day later, Cthulhu posts a video. This is what we will watch now. is the last post on the thread. So, let's discuss what happened over in this network of substations. The story tends to be called Substation 9, but it's also explicitly stated that Substation 9 is not the one John went missing in. And they're all interconnected. They're even connected to a very old mine. In other words, these substations, along with these mines, serve as an extremely complex network of tunnels. I find myself under the belief, under the impression that this was intentional by whoever built this area. The mines and the substations being connected, all interconnected. Perhaps a way of ferrying people underground without being seen. They could emerge at any of these difficult to find tiny substations, or even at the entrance to a mine. I think the raccoons that Cthulhu talks about seeing. Oh yeah, let me get the music back on. I think the raccoons probably entered into the old mines, crawled through tight spaces, and find themselves in this giant complex of tunnels. And they make a home there. It's a very safe place, since only really they can get there. And as nocturnal creatures, they're particularly well adapted to the low light environment. Not perfectly, definitely, but, you know, animals find their way. That's another thing, I suppose, is underground there is no ambient light whatsoever. If anything, that makes it, that point is what makes the presence of raccoons slightly questionable. Even low light vision requires some light to see around. But I suppose there's safety in darkness, isn't there? So, I think this system of tunnels was created intentionally. And then they were flooded. Whatever purpose they originally served, they had to focus more on their secondary purpose of actually being substations, as that was a necessity, not just so that power could continue to be sent to the people who needed it, but more importantly for whoever designed this labyrinth. These places needed to continue acting as proper substations so that whatever primary purpose that these tunnels were built for would never be uncovered. They say they found a body in Substation 9. They say the body wasn't John's. I see a single likely conclusion, and it's not a pretty one. Human trafficking. That makes sense to me in this situation. these tunnels, maybe it's not as dark as that, but I think they were meant for moving people around unseen. And the most profitable reason to do that would be human trafficking. What time was it that these tunnels were said to have been primarily in use? Let me scroll back up. Before they were flooded. I'm not sure if any specific dates were actually given. Well, the story takes place in 2016. Place seems to have been around for a while. I'm thinking these were probably constructed around 70s or 80s. That's what my gut tells me. Oh yeah, they talked about time regarding the centrifugal pumps. Some of them are over 50 years old, is what is said. So then, well, 2016 minus 50, 1966 would be, well, older than 1966 is how old these tunnels would be. Oh, that's a very notable time, isn't it? In 1966, lots of things were happening during those 1900s. Let's say we go and we say that it was around 1960. Maybe construction started even in the 1950s. Long, long time ago. Yes, that's what I thought. During the 1960s, Cold War tensions are rising. The Congo crisis erupts. And a plane crash are listed as some of the most notable events. So these tunnels would have been, I think it's fair to say, these tunnels were constructed sometime around the Cold War. Maybe these were intended as ways for soldiers to move around, while also doubling as substations. Maybe these tunnels were built out of fear of bombings, and they wanted to have large underground spaces in which the people who manage these substations could stay underground and be safe. But again, that's no reason to make them so large and interconnected. It would be enough just to give them large basements with storage areas. No, this feels like something else, doesn't it? What about you all? I'd love to hear your own ideas as to what this could be. I haven't looked too much further, but this all makes sense to me. I think that's the most plausible explanation in this case, is that these tunnels were dug for moving people around for one purpose or another. There is also one explanation that's sitting right on the tip of my mind right now, and I'm going to come out and say it. Vampires. What if those eyes that we see in the dark over there are in fact a vampiric creature of the night, a la Nosferatu, hiding underground, evading human sight, living in these tunnels and preying on the workers, perhaps even funding the company to keep things quiet and to, send in a few new hires every once in a while. And then, those new hires, yeah, they moved on to a different job after hearing something strange underground. They moved on to a different job after investigating. And down there in the crypts, haunting those tunnels, is a grisly vampire, hiding from society. Maybe that's the pale, naked person that one old-timer at the location talked about. Was this Nosferatu hiding in the crypts of the substation? And vampires, at least in some interpretations, have no need to breathe, so they could perfectly fine take cover in the flooded areas. They could even pop out from those submerged pits, grab somebody's ankle and drag them down into a flooded area, and they would be completely in the dark. Isn't that a scary thought? You're working on the substation, you have your flashlight pointed down to see where you're walking. You step right next to a flooded pit. And you think, it's a good thing my foot didn't fall in there. I might have fallen down. But before you can even finish that thought, a clawed, pale hand grips your ankle and pulls you. You're panicking. You drop your flashlight. You push against the concrete floor as you feel yourself pulled with unnatural strength deeper below. Maybe just in desperation you decide to go down, or maybe you get your leg ripped off and you bleed to death in the tunnels. With no cell service, unable to contact anyone else, unable to escape, as rising out of that tunnel is the pale face of Count Orlok, of Nosferatu, ready to make you into a hearty meal, and ready to slide the company that manages these tunnels a little cash as treat for keeping it all nice and quiet. Maybe these tunnels were constructed for gang activities, but that doesn't seem likely to me. After all, they're so far out in the sticks, so remote, they say even the people in the sticks don't know that they're there. You see? What are all of you thinking? It's definitely quite spooky. Do you have any ideas? This story definitely intrigues me quite a bit. There's so much meat to it. And yet, it remains a mystery. At the last video, they show themselves finding this exact tunnel, the one shown in the TV, with the glowing eyes. They find the exact same tunnel, and they walk toward it, toward, presumably, the same abandoned mine. the only other way in besides the substations into this network. Same place the raccoons come from. They walk toward there, and they turn off their flashlight, and the video ends. Why is that the last thing? Is there something we failed to see in the video? We can go back and watch it many times, but I didn't notice anything. Maybe you will. Maybe the right thing is to brighten the video, and you'll see Nosferatu peeking with their little pointed white ears. Perhaps, perhaps, perhaps. Or maybe the answer is something else entirely. Maybe lots of stories were said about music playing, old-timey music. From Patrice, she said. Is there piano down there? Well, sounds like Nosferatu is playing some fine tunes. And wouldn't that make sense, actually, for a vampire? To be down in the crypt of the substation, playing an old-timey tune from back in their day. However long ago that was. Maybe back in the 1800s. And this place is like their coffin. Their home. Home sweet home. Maybe there's a radio, a speaker hooked up, trying to play, maybe a gramophone, old and withered, somehow, every once in a while, playing that sweet old music. And there's so much of the station unexplored. Who knows what could be down there? Right? I like my explanation of the vampire. I think that ties everything together quite nicely. But that doesn't feel like the most plausible explanation, does it? Most plausible, someone snuck in. Maybe through the mining tunnels. Maybe they got in through a substation. Someone who wasn't John. Maybe they're the one who took that photo right there. Just before getting attacked by raccoons. Or their only flashlight losing battery. And there they go. Lost, cold, wet, afraid. And that's it. With no way to find the exit. Maybe they were in a flooded area with improper insulation when that high voltage kicked in, and they just got fried because they weren't supposed to be there. But who would come all the way out here for no reason? Maybe an Urbex explorer, although they'd be quite adventurous. Someone came in, took some photos. They died. And that's the end of the story. Same thing happens to John. The tunnels themselves are what's dangerous, not any raccoon or vampire lurking within. But that doesn't feel right, does it? It feels almost exaggeratedly simplistic, if that makes any sense. It sounds like it's being forced to be simple, being forced to be believable. Maybe that's because we don't know how John, who was never found actually, or this second person, unidentified, we don't know how they died. A mystery. A mystery indeed. With that, I think we're going to cut to commercials before we get to our third story of the night. But of course, if you have any ideas in the meantime, feel free to comment them, and I'll be sure to read them before we move on. All right. Oh my goodness. Welcome back. Welcome back to Nightlight. Substation 9. What a story, huh? What a story. I like my vampire interpretation the most. So far, anyway. If I think of a better idea, I'll let you know. I'm going to have a little bit more anti-water before we move on to our next story. This one is the shortest of the three. So I expect we will get through it rather quickly. This is a short and obscure, as far as I can tell, story from the depths of 4chan. It's from 2014 is when it was originally posted. The Denver Airport Mystery. 4chan doesn't have very good usernames. Everybody's, anonymous or possibly something uncouth. So I'll be assigning nicknames for the different posters on this thread. I'll go with naming them after condiments. So, oh yeah, and let me change the channel appropriately to get the images for this one to show. Oh. Denver Airport Mystery. There we go. OP posts an image, the original poster posts an image of the Denver Airport's infamous Blue Horse, which has been colloquially nicknamed Blucifer, due to various conspiracy theories surrounding it. OP then posts a very large block of text with no line breaks. You've heard of that horse? Yeah, Blucifer. I like that name. The original poster we can call... what condiment would be good? I'm going to say jam. It's not really a condiment. Gravy. Gravy. Mustard. I'll do that for the next one. So Gravy posts saying, "There's something underneath Denver Airport that people aren't talking about. The staff didn't seem to know about it or pretended not to. It's in the tunnels underneath the airport. It didn't make any sound when it moved. I don't work at Denver Airport, and technically I shouldn't have been down there, but I know what I saw. It was like a crowd of people fused together into one wide wall of flesh that didn't make any sound when it moved. I don't work..." Oh, sorry. I read that part already. One wide wall of flesh that blocked the entire tunnel's width. They looked like they were wearing high-vis jackets and like they worked there, but there were no gaps between any of them. Not trying to sound like a schizo, but this was real. There's some kind of huge mass of people fused together down there. I don't know what they are. I ran away as fast as I could. It only went away when I hid in a dark closet that was thankfully unlocked. I still can't get the sight of that mass of people out of my head. Has anyone ever seen this before? So then the next poster, we'll call Mustard, replies to the thread, Denver Airport was built by the Freemasons. What you saw was probably an experiment by the NWO. Those people weren't fused together, but artificial humans made to infiltrate society. Then a different poster, we'll call Ketchup, replies to Mustard saying, conspiracy, and then a word I'm not going to say. OP just ran into workers underground. It was probably dark and he got confused. The original poster, Gravy, then replies to Ketchup, it wasn't dark. The tunnel was well lit, but there were no gaps between the people. Their skin was fused together. Mustard then replies to Ketchup's original accusation, saying, I'm not a word I'm not going to say. You're brainwashed, you dumbass. It's so obvious if you open your eyes. Then a new poster to the thread, we'll call Mayonnaise, applies to the original post and says, I've seen something similar. The people you saw were past and future versions of who you are trying to reclaim you into their timeline. They only appear when you are in a well-lit place next to a dark area, and you're displaced in the wrong timeline. You should come back and join into them, otherwise you'll never make it I made another typo, to your original timeline. Then Gravy replies to Mayonnaise, I'm not doing that. Then the last part and the most interesting one is Gravy making a post in 2015 saying, so a year later, so it was originally posted in 2014, then a year later in 2015, about 3 days before the original post, says, I'm going back to Denver Airport. And there's no follow-up to the thread. That's the last post. Now, as I said, this one is much shorter, but it caught my attention, so I decided to add it to the list. Now, there's a lot of conspiracy theories surrounding Denver Airport. They have Freemasonry symbols all over the airport. There's, of course, the infamous Blucifer. Yeah, if you see this horse twice, you'll die. You just don't know it yet. There's also a lot of, this was posted on the X board of 4chan, and there's a lot of very conspiratorial folks there. Hello, Discord Light. So when Mayonnaise says that the people that they saw underground who were wearing high-vis jackets were Gravy from different timelines. Gotta go to sleep early. Okay, you get some wonderful rest, Discord Light. Why the Gravy says they don't work at Denver Airport. So why would the alternate versions of them from other timelines all be wearing high-vis jackets or look like they worked at Denver Airport? I guess it's possible within that storyline, that thread, that idea, that they could be lying about not working for Denver Airport to try to keep their job or something, and they just saw something strange. maybe mayonnaise is wrong, and these aren't people from another timeline. Maybe mustard is right, and that these are artificial humans in the tunnels underneath Denver Airport. The tunnels of Denver Airport are quite well known as well. People have always found them kind of strange, which is maybe why there are so many conspiracy stories surrounding Denver Airport, like one which is that there are artificial people being created underneath Denver Airport, which kind of makes sense if you're making artificial people for that's a good way to deliver them into society, is put them on a plane, send them somewhere. They walk out of the plane, everybody can account for seeing them there, and then your big government, you forge some identification for them, file them into the system, and bam, it's like they've always existed, even if they just came into existence on that day and on that plane. Definitely a very strange story. If we're going to explain this, and I will say, the one rule for Nightlight is you can't just say, this story's fake, and ignore it. The point is, I guess, to go into it with the assumption that it's real. So, assuming that what this person saw is real, you agree with the artificial humans hypothesis? Seeing a crowd of people fused together. What could that be? If it is artificial people, maybe whatever artificial skin they have, like melted together. Sounds like I know where the secret infiltration port for aliens would be, under an airport. Yeah. There you go. Hiding underneath there. Maybe it's not artificial humans that are under there, but aliens who disguise themselves to look like people. And maybe whatever material is used for skin for either these artificial humans or these aliens pretending to be human, at some temperature, maybe it melds together. And then there's a crowd of them underneath there. And the temperature is just too hot. They don't think anybody's around, so they're just walking through the tunnel. It sounds like taking up the entire space of the tunnel is the way they describe it. Yeah, blocked the entire tunnel's width is what they say. Maybe it was the equivalent of a closet with a bunch of suits hung up close together. Maybe. Something like that. Another thing, these tunnels are well lit, so it doesn't sound like it would be something that they saw just in the darkness. Yeah, people clog up a tunnel. They keep saying that there were no gaps between the people. Like they were fused together. But they were still walking unimpeded. Yeah, they meant the store. Wait, I'm confused. Which store? No gaps. Oh. I see. No gaps at this airport. No gaps between these people. Is actually perfectly wide tunnel. Just two people on either side. uh, but my point is, if these people were fused together, they would have trouble moving. They'd be like stumbling over each other, right? Unless they were moving in perfect concord. Unless this is one organism that just looks like a bunch of people, then it would be stumbling around in this tunnel. Uh, or they would be stumbling around in this tunnel, not knowing which way everybody else is going to move. Which maybe this person did hallucinate something. Maybe there weren't gaps between these people and it was just a crowd of workers moving through the tunnel. That is definitely the most likely explanation, right? Maybe it is aliens, though, or artificial humans, their skin melting together, and it's just flexible enough, just stretchy enough that they don't need to move in concord to not fall over and stumble. Maybe it's way more stretchy than normal human skin. Maybe it's highly elastic. Maybe if you grabbed their cheek, you could drag it a foot away, and it would just slap back like a rubber band. That timeline one does intrigue me though, because also they say they don't work at Denver Airport. If you're gonna sneak into any place, particularly an airport, what might you wear, right? Maybe Gravy was wearing a high vis jacket. That doesn't seem totally outside the realm of possibilities, does it? Maybe they really were wearing a high vis jacket, right? And those people who are supposed to be them from an alternate timeline trying to drag them back into the right timeline are them. And that's why they're all wearing high vis jackets too. So in a way, it's the Gravy's own attempt to make themselves look like they work at Denver Airport made them think that the versions of themselves from a different timeline work at Denver Airport. That's your unfun guess would be lighting between the walls that you could see between them and look like their skin/shirts, but also who sneaks around an airport. That's just about the last place you'd want to do that. That's true. People sneak around everywhere, though. Anywhere they can. I like that timeline idea I just came up with, though, is that they were fooled by the high vis jackets in the same way they were trying to fool the people around them. It's all they know. The lighting making the walls you could see between them look like their skin and shirts. That's not a bad idea, actually. I don't think that's an unfun guess. The more explanations, the better, I think. I like that. I actually like that one a lot. I think the timeline one is the funniest with the idea of them being fooled by themselves, by the same disguise that they're wearing. And then, a year later, 3 days before the anniversary of the first post, they just say, I'm going back to Denver Airport. Maybe they went there and they got arrested for trespassing, and they were embarrassed to follow up on the story and say, I got arrested. I can't go back to Denver Airport anymore. That seems very possible to me. Maybe they got pulled back into their original timeline. Maybe the NWO captured them for seeing too much. Maybe they got fused together into the mass. Yeah, maybe they're part of the meat mass now. They joined the tunnel mass. Yeah, maybe. Maybe there is a big mass of flesh that just moves around the basement of Denver Airport, the tunnels, just assimilating whoever it can, employees or trespassers alike. Maybe those who work there know something and they won't tell. They won't say, oh yes, we know about the flesh monster underneath Denver Airport. You know, the one that Denver Airport was made to contain, like the labyrinth with the Minotaur in it. That's a fun idea too. The Minotaur in its own labyrinth. In a way, this is similar to Substation 9, isn't it? Maybe that hypothetical vampire is also kept underneath Substation 9 through that labyrinth. Maybe it's the same thing here. This mass of flesh is moved around, guided around the labyrinth of tunnels underneath Denver Airport. But if you're trying to contain a flesh monster, an airport seems like the worst place to do that. A place where hundreds of people go to almost every day, not the place you want to put the assimilating flesh mass, unless your goal was to grow it. Right? Maybe both things being hard to discern visually makes them similar in the first story. We can't trust what we can and can't see. In the first story, Candle Cove, yes. Your eyes play tricks on you, and those tricks can sometimes let you see something else, something that is there but is hidden. You just have to look the right way, right? Yes. I suppose you all see why this story also caught my attention. There's so many interesting ideas of what this could be. And it disappeared when Gravy went into a dark closet. Maybe that's because it couldn't follow. Right? Maybe it is stuck down there. Maybe it's a kind of government experiment. These tunnels exist to be just wide enough that the creature can move around, this mass can move around, but people can take cover in these closets or side areas that it can't reach into. And maybe every once in a while, a passenger misses their flight, goes missing at Denver Airport. And the mass... Yeah, why did it make no sound? That's true. Yeah. It's in the tunnels underneath the airport, and it didn't make any sound when it moved. That's true. I forgot about that detail. No sound. That's true. You'd expect you'd expect it to be very loud. Did it move? Maybe it's there, but it's dead. Oh. Oh, maybe. It might be dead. They don't say anything about it moving. Hmm. That's true. That they don't say anything about it pursuing them, just that they ran away and then went into a dark closet and it was gone, I guess, when they left. Interesting. Maybe it is dead. Maybe it was just killed somehow. And in the time that they were hiding in that dark closet, it got cleaned away, taken somewhere else. Maybe it moved somewhere else as silently as it arrived. Because if it was a mass of flesh of people moving around, you'd expect to hear very heavy footfalls. Curious. Very curious. Yeah, groans or something. And if it was a bunch of workers, you'd think there'd be footsteps. Yes, definitely. So the mundane answer is actually unlikely. Yeah, hmm. I suppose, maybe it was floating. that's that's what comes to mind to me. If it doesn't make any sound when it moves, then it must either move slowly and quietly, or it isn't touching the ground. Maybe it's filled with helium and it's like a big underground zeppelin. Maybe, ooh, this is, or really far away. Also true, it could be. But in a tunnel, you'd expect there to be lots of like reverb, wouldn't you? This is the more kooky answer. But in European mythology, there is the idea of the wild hunt, which is essentially a horde of ghosts, which around wintertime ravage through the wind, rattling windows as they go. Certainly, normally they aren't very quiet. In fact, generally they're rather loud. But let's say this is something similar, right? What if it's a horde of ghosts moving around in the tunnels underneath Denver Airport? A horde of ghosts. That would explain the silence. Could have been far away. Also true. The Gravy, the original poster, may have just not actually noticed the sound and thought they made no sound. Maybe what they really noticed, which made them turn and see this mass, whatever it was it stopping. And they just didn't register the footsteps. And they turn and they see people. Maybe they get a little closer, and that's when they believe that they see no gaps between them. And then they rush, they go into a dark closet, and they're left alone. And the people are gone. Hmm. I definitely wish they provided more details in this particular case. If there is a horde of ghosts, whose ghosts could they be underneath Denver Airport? Maybe workers who, during the dark construction of this Freemason conspiracy-filled airport, maybe some workers died or got sealed in the walls, Amontillado style. And now a horde of their ghosts wanders through the halls of the underground tunnels. Maybe it was a visual trick of the eye or the ear. What if there was something which could have impeded the hearing of Gravy, the original poster? What if there was a reason they couldn't hear, and that's why they didn't hear any sound? There is such a thing as a sort of projected silence. I believe the way that it works is a volume of a sound, of a pitch that you can't actually hear, is played so loud you become unable to actually hear what's around you. Same sort of different principle from noise canceling, but maybe there was some noise canceling feature of either these tunnels, the mass, or the person themselves, or maybe a fourth option we haven't considered. What if there was a reason they couldn't hear, right? And that would revive our previous ideas as well, as possibilities. Maybe the mass emitted a sort of noise-canceling anti-sound, we could call it. Some effect canceled out the sound of the creature moving enough that Gravy thought that it was quiet completely. And underground in these tunnels, there is always some kind of ambient sound of machines or trucks, something moving around in the distance, echoing through the halls. So it wouldn't necessarily have to be perfectly silent, just quiet enough. Quiet enough that they didn't notice it. Now, I doubt the tunnels would be noise canceling. Not only would that be rather expensive to do. Oh yeah, maybe it was so loud in the tunnels they couldn't tell sounds apart. That's true. It could have been the complete opposite of what we're assuming. It could have been so loud that they couldn't hear whatever sound the mass, whatever it was, made when they turned to see it. So I see it in my mind's eye now. They're infiltrating Denver Airport for whatever reason. Maybe they're just curious. Maybe they got lost, or they're intentionally trespassing just for the thrill. Or maybe they're a conspiracy nut and they're trying to find secrets of Denver Airport. They're trying to find the Freemasons down here. So they go down into these tunnels and they're walking around for a while. It's loud. There's machinery everywhere. And they figure that's kind of to their benefit. Maybe they're wearing that high vis jacket, blending in, walking as if they belong there. And, you know, being a little bit paranoid. Oh, they look behind them. They see something pale. They take another look. There's a mass of people filling up the width of the tunnel. Enjoy your devil's fingers. That scared me a little. A mass of people filling up the width of the tunnel. And they freak out. They start running. They find a door. They open it. It's a dark closet. They close it quietly and sit inside for who knows how long. Then, when they finally work up the courage to leave, whatever it was they saw, whoever it was they saw, is gone. And they leave. That's definitely possible. Maybe it was just a crowd of people. Maybe they didn't get a very good look. Maybe they did get a good look. Maybe it was artificial people, aliens, ghosts, a assimilating mass of flesh masquerading as a group of people, just trying to help you find the exit. As it slowly moves across the tunnel toward you. Very good. Maybe it is the past and future versions of that same person who are trying to reclaim Gravy back into their original timeline. Maybe Denver Airport is built on top of some sort of supernatural ley line, and that's why they only appear there. And maybe they go back to Denver Airport and they get sent back to that timeline. Or they go back to Denver Airport and they get arrested for trespassing and get embarrassed and don't make a follow-up post. Or maybe other things happen. Good old Denver Airport, indeed. And there's Blucifer right on the screen. This is reminding me of an urban, I guess it's kind of an urban legend. It's not really a ghost story exactly. I think I actually brought it up on stream one time, but essentially the way that it goes is hold on, let me get a drink of water before I tell this one. Oh no, that was water, not anti-water. I'm going to explode. Anyway, the urban legend, we'll call it, goes something like this. A person is sitting on their couch in a well, no, in a well lit area in like their living room. The lights on, and over toward the kitchen, we'll say, the lights are off. It's very dark there. And they see a little baby's hand climb just out of the darkness. They're confused, definitely. But when another hand shows up, they start getting very anxious. Then they see the mass move toward them, clawing at the walls as if the hands were ripping, as if the walls were made of ground beef, and these hands were ripping it away. Climbing out of the darkness into the light, they see a leg, a familiar arm, another familiar leg, more familiar arms, a bunch of body parts, mostly limbs, which all are familiar to them in some way. It's never specified exactly how. And the story ends when they see a familiar face. And they disappear entirely. That's how the legend goes. And they say that if you think about this mass that took them late at night, when you're in a well-lit area next to a dark area, that the mass will come for you. That one sounds rather similar to this, doesn't it? A little bit. They're in a well-lit area. There's not necessarily a dark area nearby. Maybe there is. It's not described anywhere, but maybe there is a dark area nearby where this mass comes out from. And it's something similar. And it's trying to take this person so that they disappear. Trying to show them that familiar face, however that works. But the person escapes because they go into a dark closet, a place that isn't well lit. Ooh, that gives me the chills. I think that's interesting. I like that interpretation. Sounds like a good excuse to use the knife you have on your desk. Well, there you go. But what good is a knife against a mass with hundreds of arms and legs? Especially ones that look familiar to you. Do you think you could stab a familiar face if it came toward you with no mercy before it takes you? I might hesitate. I'm pretty satisfied with that explanation. So, what do these three stories we've gone over have in common? Strange occurrences that are hard to explain, but each of them are somehow seemingly plausible, at least. There seems to be some kind of rational explanation for how these could have come to be. You might not believe that one or any of these stories is true, but the things that they describe might be real. There are things that might be true. Maybe you don't believe them. Maybe someone did see something under Denver Airport, but maybe they were mistaken about what they saw. Maybe the reason they never made a follow-up post is because they were embarrassed. Maybe there really is someone or something hiding in the tunnels underneath Substation 9. Or maybe those kids did collectively form some kind of false memory of Candle Cove. maybe the world itself is fiction. And maybe that doesn't matter as much as the connections we have and the things that bind us. I would like to thank you all very much for coming for the first episode of Nightlight. If you've enjoyed, please let me know. And we might get an episode 2. But if our ratings are too low, if the audience doesn't like it, there might not ever be an episode 2. But I think this is a fun format. And if we do hear some good hubbub, people saying they like this and they want to see more, you can find us right here on the Mystery Channel. You really like this show? I'm glad to hear it. I'm very glad to hear it. Thank you for joining us this night. We hope you'll catch us next time on Nightlight. Thank you very much for watching. Have a lovely evening and lovely dreams. We're a little early, about 9 minutes before the original end time. But we're gonna go for it. Thank you all very much for coming. I really, really appreciate it. Yeah, get those devil's fingers. Creepy crawly devil's fingers. Alright. And for the Amethyst Deceiver, what channel are we on? What channel is this Nightlight broadcast on, everyone? First person to get it gets the Amethyst Deceiver. There you go. Congratulations, Nyx. You've earned the Amethyst Deceiver. Very good. All right. And thank you for supporting community television.
Oh my goodness gracious.